Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Barry Eisler. Barry is the Vice President and Assistant General Counsel at ADP, where he manages all the legal affairs for ADP's small business services and human resources outsourcing business units. And those units represent, Brett, over $9 billion with a B, $9 billion of revenue.
I'm sorry, how much was that?
$9 billion with a B.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a great deal of revenue.
It's pretty big. He's been at ADP, Barry, you've been at ADP, what, 15 years?
About 15 years. I joined in 2006.
2006. And before that, he was an M&A, corporate, and securities lawyer at the law firm of Chadbourne & Park, and you were there for 13 years.
About 13 years.
Welcome, Barry.
If you do the math, you can see how long I've been practicing law.
You know what that means? It means you're old.
Welcome, Barry. I just want
guys.
you to know, every guest is called a special guest by Jeff, but you were called a very special guest. So I just want you to know, you should feel honored.
I want you both to know that I didn't even consciously do that. That's how special
that's
you are.
right.
I threw in a very without it just came out.
Maybe this is a very special episode
Well, I don't know.
of the Practice Podcast.
It might be. I'm going to step out of the way a little bit to let you guys bromance a little
stay
and then
tuned.
jump in here and there.
That is
True. Go ahead.
all right. So Barry,
Yes.
tell us.
First, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
And thanks for being here. We really do appreciate having you. And we know you're a busy guy, and we appreciate you taking the time to come here and speak with us and with all our millions of listeners. So how'd you end up here? How'd you end up as a lawyer at ADP? Tell us your background.
How did I end up as a lawyer at ADP? So out of law school, I went right to the big firm. I went to law school in New York with one person in this room at least. And I stayed in New York.
Go Violets.
Yeah, go Violets. I stayed in New York. I did the big firm thing. I went to Chadbourne & Park, where I was an M&A, securities, corporate lawyer. Did that for about 13 years. And then I made the move in-house when I joined ADP in 2006, as we mentioned.
So, and how big is Chadbourne & Park? How big was that office?
Chadbourne, that
Or the
office
firm
was
in the
probably
office?
about 200 or 300. I think the whole firm was about 350 or 400 people. They're not around anymore. I don't know where everybody went, but big chunks of that firm are at Norton Rose and Winston & Strawn.
Right. But at that time, those are pretty big.
It was a big firm. It had a long and storied history.
And what was your practice there? I'm sorry if you said it already, but what was your practice?
Mostly M&A, corporate and securities.
Yeah.
The group that I was with really represented kind of large institutional clients. So I did a lot of work for the same 5 or 6 kind of big conglomerate type clients.
And then you went from Chadbourne & Park to ADP, or did you have a stop in between?
No, directly to ADP. My first move, when I joined ADP, I was a corporate M&A and securities lawyer there as well. So it was a really smooth
Natural
transition as a substantive matter, right? My practice as a lawyer hardly changed at all because I'd been representing clients, not ADP, but clients like ADP in these same exact kinds of matters. So instead of working for a bunch of different companies and doing different deals in different industries, I was basically doing deals and helping with the securities work for just one client.
And ADP, and this would have been ADP acquiring other businesses over the time?
Yeah. A couple of dispositions, but mostly acquisitions.
Wow.
What was the size of the legal department back then when you joined? Do you know?
That's a good question. It was probably about 120 or 130.
That's
not all lawyers. That includes,
staff and
paralegals,
stuff.
compliance professionals.
But that's a pretty decent sized law firm in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're at around 150 or 160 now.
Lawyers or staff?
No,
like
that would
everyone.
be the entire department.
Okay.
Wow. And so what made you make that change? 'Cause I think a lot of lawyers out there, we're trying to focus on what our listeners may be interested in, think about making that move and think about making the transition to either in-house or some other position. What was that experience like?
Well, it would be a better story if I told you that my dream all my life was to be an in-house lawyer, but that's not really how it played out. It was more like I was done with the big firm thing. And like this was the skill set that I had. And like I think a lot of lawyers that have spent too much time at big firms started looking around and in-house looked attractive. And then it was kind of a stroke of luck when I found this role at ADP because it was such, like I said before, it was such a smooth transition in terms of the substance of my practice. Completely different environment, right? But the actual doing deals, doing securities work, doing corporate governance, it was all stuff I was already, an expert at. So I felt really confident making that move.
Right. And so your client was your employer.
Exactly.
Well, and you get to understand, rather than having to learn the structure of every new client that comes in your door from when you were at a big firm. Now you sort of know, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you start to see kind of more of the story of like, so when I'm doing deals, right, it's all M&A. Right. You start to see the story of like, what kind of deals are they doing? What are they looking for? Which deals don't work, right? Like, what does their diligence process look like? What's their risk tolerance when they're doing deals?
So there's some knowns going into every new deal. You have that sort of taken care of. And then you just look at whatever the acquiring or, acquiree, I should say.
Right. And you get used to doing kind of the same process with the same people.
Right. And when you joined ADP, so transitioning from Chadbourne to ADP, who did you answer to at that time?
So it's always in the legal department.
Right.
The guy who hired me just a few years later became our general counsel. So I reported to him for a while. And then around that time is when I shifted because I'm not still really an M&A lawyer. Well, I'm still an M&A lawyer, but I don't practice M&A anymore.
Right. Once an M&A lawyer, always an M&A
exactly.
lawyer. You never shake that.
So around the time that he became general counsel, there was an opening on a legal team, which is what brought me to Miami for one of our business units. And so he kind of tapped me on the shoulder and was like, why don't you take on this challenge? We'll move you down to Miami, lead the legal team for one of our business units. And that's the case where I really made a departure from my practice. So unlike when I went in as an M&A lawyer, now I'm in a world where I'm not the expert anymore. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm sort of learning how to lead a team of other experts, right? And learn a lot about a business and kind of develop and challenge myself into doing a completely different role, which has turned out to be one of the best moves I've ever made. So just, maybe that's just personal, but it's much more rewarding doing that kind of stuff.
Well, in addition to being closer to Jeff.
And I got closer to
Right. I mean, as we all.
And you, Brett.
We joke.
I appreciate that, but we're all very blessed to be near him. But
we joke, but when he moved down here, it was like he was our fourth kid. He did come to my house. Jolly would feed him, take good care of him.
I have no doubt.
I was very dependent on the Bass family.
But I think you said something really important there, among other things, but in particular, I'll pull it out, which is that even though you didn't necessarily know the particular area, substance of what you were coming to lead, you know how to lead, right? And one of the things you did was pull upon the expertise of those that you were sort of leading and the team that you were leading.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of my favorite parts of the job, really, is because, I'm a legal executive managing different areas of law. I've got litigators, ERISA lawyers, employment lawyers, a government affairs function, contracts function. I mean, all of these different functions are now reporting into me.
Right.
And I'm not an expert really in any of them, right? Like I said, I was a corporate M&A lawyer. Right. The closest would be the transactional folks in the contracts where I felt like I could really step in and add a lot of value. Other than that, it was kind of being that leader, listening to what people have to say, trusting their expertise. And they're coming to me with the real judgment calls, not the kind of technical questions, because I don't have anything to offer as a technical matter. But when there are decisions that leak into the business side or affect the company's risk tolerance, that's where I could kind of add some value there.
So in a sense, like these in-house, so we're talking about these experts you're talking about are in-house lawyers themselves. And they report to you, you're their client in a sense, but you internally have a client that's whoever the business person might be in the division or not?
I don't know that. By the way, I should pause and just say that I don't speak for ADP.
Okay,
right? I'm speaking in my personal capacity, et cetera.
Do you want to put that in a more serious voice, that text, tag, and title not included? Right?
Yeah, exactly. A nice long disclaimer.
Right.
So I am speaking for myself personally and not in my capacity as Vice President and Assistant General Counsel at ADP.
There you go.
Is that better?
That's very good. Well done.
But yeah, no, I don't think it's fair to say that I was their client, right? And if you go back to the Code of Professional Responsibility or whatever, an in-house lawyer's client is the corporation as an entity.
Right.
So I am not their client. Our business partners are not really their client. Your client is the corporation. And, maybe that's something you learned in law school or studied for the bar exam and have since forgotten. But I think for in-house lawyers, if you kind of keep that in the front of mind, it will answer a lot of questions and kind of guide you. So those folks who were experts and had their jobs, I'm their manager, but I really think of myself as their colleague, right? And we're working together to solve problems and deliver solutions for the business. So so it wouldn't be accurate to call me their client or even say the president of a business unit or a sales leader. Like they're not your client in any kind of individual capacity or even in their role in their title. You have the
Right.
larger obligation to the corporation as a whole.
Right, but that corporation acts through representatives,
Correct.
right? And so somebody's acting on behalf of the corporation or making decisions. Because ultimately,
Right.
an in-house lawyer who's negotiating terms of a deal of some sort has to get client approval for some decisions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can say client kind of little c informally.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, fair enough,
Stakeholders,
yeah, right.
another term people use.
Right.
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 But yeah, you're certainly working with people and you're deferring to them on questions that are, business decisions versus legal decisions. But even somebody in the business, even an executive, they've only got so much authority with respect to the corporation's balance sheet. And so in many ways, the legal department or certainly a legal leader is something of a check on that.
Right.
It's kind of an informal control function. It's not
Mhm.
really a control function in a formal sense, but a bit of a gatekeeper, if you will.
Right.
So ADP is, I think most people would know it as a payroll company, right?
Right.
But it does a lot more today, I would imagine,
Yeah.
given some of the roll up, right? So can you give us sort of a sense of just generally what
Yeah, if you're
ADP does?
so the term for the industry these days is human capital management or HCM,
I like that.
which is to take it beyond just payroll into HR administration,
Mhm.
time and labor management, benefits administration, any background checks, employee screening, tax filing, tax credits. I mean, there's a number of businesses that are, for the most part, adjacent to kind of the HR stack within
Right.
a corporation. And not even just big corporations, even small companies, small businesses.
And that's ADP Total Source, is that right? Or
ADP Total Source is one business with one business unit within ADP, and that's our professional employer organization. So that is kind of the richest, most robust kind of HCM offering in the marketplace, right? Because it's all of that HR outsourcing with a co-employment element to it. So ADP Total Source becomes a co-employer with the client of the employees. And that allows a PEO to offer benefits, provide workers' compensation, do state unemployment management, a bunch of kind of additional offerings and services that wouldn't be available without that employment relationship.
so, like, to use an example, if we hired ADP Total Source at Bass Damron,
Which you should.
which we should, okay. So I know you're not on the sales side, but the idea would be that we would co-employ, our employees would work for us and
Yeah,
Total Source?
Yeah, so it'd be co-employment. I mean, you're obviously going to manage the
Right.
day-to-day of your employees,
Right.
but you would get your benefits through Total Source. Your workers' compensation would be through Total Source, and your employees' paychecks and W-2s would come from Total Source or the PEO, unlike
Right.
probably what you have today.
Right. Very cool. I have a question shifting gears a little bit. So you have this team of lawyers. Do you and your team also hire outside lawyers for components of your practice?
Yes, right. So there are some areas where we just need that advice and guidance because it's either too risky or too sophisticated, or there's questions that are kind of beyond what we're going to do as in-house lawyers. Generally, my team's not going to dig deep and start researching cases and drafting memos. That's not what we do in-house.
Right.
Right. So if there are really sticky questions of interpretation of the law, or if we're, say, trying to bundle our products in some new and unique way that has regulatory implications, we might go to an outside firm with expertise for a blessing. So that's one example. Litigation, obviously, we use outside counsel. I've got a team that manages litigation from in-house, but they're not arguing in court.
Right.
And then, there's various kind of random places where we'll use outside counsel.
And your in-house lawyers, they don't track hours. So here, by the way, here's another pitch for those.
There you go.
For those lawyers who are thinking about the in-house gig, they don't track hours. Do they track hours at all?
We do not track hours.
Okay.
So for all of your listeners that are out there doing their timesheets and billing hours, come on in-house.
Are you hiring? Because maybe you want to put in a plug
I
while
am
we're
hiring
here.
right now, actually.
Oh, there you go. If you're listening, reach out to Barry. So what I was going to ask was related to tracking hours is what percentage of time is actual quote unquote billable time versus managing outside lawyers for your...
Well, that is, we don't use the term billable time,
Right.
but that's value added time, right? If
Right.
you're managing outside lawyers, there's not a lot of places where aside from litigation, there's not a lot of places where we use outside counsel to just kind of run with matters for us. It's generally we go to them for specific,
right.
discrete advice. And I'm sure other corporations might run their legal departments differently, but that's kind of how we do it at ADP.
Right.
And what are some issues that you are seeing these days that pop up, some of the more challenging issues given the scope of the services, right, that ADP provides in employment? I mean, employers are having, right, all kinds of issues, but like, are there like 2 or 3 that are really popping up all the time?
Are we including COVID in this conversation, or
I just said current times, right?
Yeah.
So obviously that is a host of issues. COVID being one, but you now have employees that could be working all over the place, right? You maybe have one office, and you may have employees working all over the United States, or maybe even internationally now, right?
Yeah. So, as horrible as this pandemic is overall, in the HCM industry, it's tended to be kind of a positive, right? Because we can add a lot of value for our clients who are struggling with these kinds of issues. What should my mask policy be? What should I do about vaccines? If you have the richer HCM bundles, right? Like not just payroll, we might have sample policies, or what kind of best practices, that kind of HR advice. We can really help small businesses, even medium-sized businesses, kind of manage this stuff. And then there's the technology side of it, right? So we've got our app that can track and check in every day. Do I have any symptoms? How am I feeling?
Right.
Do I have my vaccine? So there's a tech side to it as well.
That's an offering as part of the bundles?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far into ADP's product set, but that's something we have. So that's been really, it's been a lot of internal work, especially the beginning of the pandemic when nobody knew what was going on. That was much more stressful. Again, it's weird to talk about it this way, but as we sort of settled into the pandemic and it became like a normal, right? That's the point where it was really more opportunity for companies in this industry than it was a challenge. Now, internally, we have all the same challenges that any other large organization has, with the vaccines, the turnover, moving to remote work, like all of that stuff applies internally. But again, most of that, the legal department and our lawyers, we're involved in our return to office plans and helping with those policies and stuff. But I wouldn't say it's like a huge part of our mission, right?
Well, at some point I would, you went back to the beginning of the pandemic, right? As all of us were sitting around saying like, what is going to happen here? Nobody knew.
Yeah.
Shifting to, okay, so now what do we do? Do you guys sort of, at some point, when could you like target when you all internally at ADP were like, okay, so now we need to figure out what our clients need and how do we get moving in that direction?
Yeah. So I don't want to speak for ADP, but we're in our transition back to the office. Like we're not going fully remote anytime soon, like some other companies have. And I actually forgot something, that a lot of the work for a company like ADP or others in our industry related to the pandemic was the government programs, right? So the Paycheck Protection Program was something that was run through payroll and was related to payroll. So obviously ADP had a big part to play there. A lot of work for the legal teams as we were kind of navigating this whole new area of law and a statute that was drafted, overnight, and dumped on the Small Business Administration, who had never administered anything like that before. There was a lot to figure out there. And then with the Social Security deferrals and the employee retention tax credits, these are all things that are going to flow through a business's relationship with their HCM company.
Yeah.
So a lot of work there. But again, since I think ADP pretty much got it right, a lot of opportunity. We found clients got stickier than ever as we helped them through those kinds of programs.
Well, you guys really, because everybody was kind of playing catch up, but you guys really had to be the leaders and figuring things out.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember at that time when we were all trying to figure it out, we all had versions. I remember people sharing versions of spreadsheets where they were calculating the PPP and how to handle it. And it was just chaos for us. But you guys had to be on the front line because you're also answering to clients who were asking you, what the heck do we do here?
But again, we tried to turn it into an opportunity. And in fact, our legal department, including myself, it was like all hands on deck, learn how this stuff works, help our technology teams kind of develop products and reports so our clients can press a button, print out their Paycheck Protection Program report, submit it to their lender, and then they're off to the races, right?
Nice.
So that's an advantage of, again, this isn't a pitch for ADP, but that's an advantage for being, for having our scale and our market position.
But look, there are companies, I'm not saying there are companies that match ADP, but there are companies like ADP out there that your job, as Jeff indicated, was to figure it out to help your client base. Right. So you literally had to do it before anybody else did it to figure out what was going on and then set up the tech, set up the forms, set up the policies.
Exactly.
and to catch up quicker, faster than anybody else did. And so I imagine that when you say all hands on deck, I mean, people have no idea what that meant at that time.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And to take it back to the beginning of our conversation, right? So if I consider myself originally an M&A lawyer, right? That was my training. And now I'm learning about the minutia of how the Small Business Administration might run a program like this. Yeah. So everybody kind of had to learn this stuff. And, there was no playbook for that, right? I mean, we were making it up as we went along.
Right. But it's also, learning in a manner that you then have to communicate to somebody else as, you're becoming the teacher. You're the student becoming the teacher overnight, literally.
Yeah, exactly. So I talked about our technology development teams, but there was also, a web development team because our FAQs are up there and ADP's 800,000 clients are going to hit that website looking for answers on how these programs work, and so our legal department had a big part in making sure those answers were right.
Well, congratulations on making it through. You still have hair.
That's some hair.
That's a good.
Still have a job. Something's working.
That's a good sign. So, all right, let's talk about the transition from law firm to in-house. There are all those lawyers out there listening to this who are thinking about it. Any sort of piece of advice you would give someone who's just thinking about making that move?
Yeah. I would say do it.
All right, we're done. Podcast over. Thanks for listening.
By the way, everybody. He means that for anyone whose email does not end with @bastamron.com.
Exactly.
Right?
I would never want any of your people who are obviously dedicated to private practice. But no, look, if it's the fit for you, I think it's obviously a personal choice, right? And it's where you want to take your career. I couldn't be happier that I made that move. I had 13 years at a big firm. Like I had really had enough. It's not just the billable hours. It was kind of, I was at the point where the pressure to kind of produce billables and do marketing and sales. And I never felt that was a strength of mine. And I didn't want my career to have to depend on that. So by going in-house, I was able to sort of still practice at kind of level that kept me engaged without having that whole other side of it.
Right.
So for me, in my situation, that was like the big draw.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of lawyers encounter that struggle with, hey, I've spent the first however many years of my career developing my technical skills. Now I'm expected to add this completely separate and distinct skill of business development, which is totally unrelated to anything you've been doing for 10 years. They didn't teach it in law school. They probably haven't been encouraging it, training, facilitating, or doing anything else. But suddenly you're expected to just start doing it.
Exactly.
And so I think a lot of young lawyers encounter that. That's part of why, we try to encourage our young lawyers to do it from the beginning, because it doesn't happen overnight. You need to work on that for pretty much your whole career to develop it. All right. So somebody's making the move, and now flipping the table a little bit. What's the advice that you give to the client, to the law firms that you now hire? Because you used to be the hiree, right?
Right.
You used to be that corporate lawyer hired by the big corporations for a deal.
Client.
And now you're a terrible client.
I'm a terrible client.
Why? All right.
You don't want me as a client.
Why are you a terrible client?
Because I'm really demanding.
That's
I have
client.
extremely high expexpections.
Okay.
In terms of responsiveness and work product.
All right. So what is your expectation in terms of responsiveness? You want a response?
Yeah. Well, responsiveness, actually, yes. It's get back fast. Like if you don't return calls, if you don't get those emails back fast, I'll find another firm.
And I would imagine that even an email that says, is this time sensitive? I'm tied up. Can I get it to you at whatever time? Can I respond? I imagine that satisfies you.
Acknowledge the note. You don't have to have the answer that day.
Right.
I mean, there's a little cliche in our team. It's like, don't let the sun set on an email.
Right.
Or a phone
There's
call.
no voicemails anymore.
Right. Yeah. And that's what we tout here too. Same thing with our clients, right? Or opposing counsel even in those cases.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to respond.
Right. So, but that's almost like baseline. Like if you can't get that right, forget it. But then, there's all the standard stuff that you probably encounter with your clients, be straightforward in your billing. Like, don't make me have to question bills and figure stuff out. I mean, it should be pretty straightforward and fair. And then there's like a level of professionalism and advice that I'm looking for. Again, I was trained kind of old school white shoe firm. Everything was perfect. There were no typos. Presentation mattered. and everything was super tight and super professional. And that's kind of what I expect from my law firm. So if I see something that comes out the door and it looks a little half-assed to me, it really burns me. So that's why I say I'm a difficult client, right?
I hear you're saying difficult, but I think those are kind of like you expect a response,
right?
And you don't want messy work product, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, I think what we've encountered both internally and externally, if you get something that is full of typos, it immediately has a suggestion of a lack of care.
Right.
Right. And so then you start questioning the substance of the memo. Now the typos or whatever it is have distracted from the actual content of the memo, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little old school, but you're right. I think it's an indicator of the kind of effort that went into the work, right?
Right.
But the other thing that's important, I think, is to get kind of actionable advice. There are lawyers out there that give kind of ivory tower answers to your questions, which...
What does that mean? What do you mean?
They can just be kind of academic. Well, there is a case out there that says X, Y, Z.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I need to get to the next step. So what do other companies in a similar situation do when they're confronted with an issue presented in case X, Y, Z?
Well, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals back in 1975 ruled that, okay, that's great. Thank you so much for that. But tell me how that helps me and what can I do? Right? That's what you're looking for.
Exactly.
Practical.
Because that's how I have to talk to, my business stakeholders. They don't want to hear about a case in the Fifth Circuit from 1972. They just want to know,
can I or can I not?
Can I or can't I?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I imagine that's a struggle for a lot of lawyers. Don't appreciate that that's what they're doing. I think sometimes we'll lose the forest for the trees. Right. And say, look, what our client wants is just an answer to a question. Can I do this or can I not do this? And if the answer is not so clear, then tell me the risks and the possible risks.
Exactly.
And I can make an informed decision. So we're trying to make our clients.
It may not be a yes or no. It may be you might be able to, but let me tell you the risks if you do and the rewards if you or the risks if you don't, right? Like give me both sides. But I think that's what you want. Then let you make an informed decision.
I mean, we're trying to solve a problem, right? It's not a law school exam.
Right.
We've got a real world problem that we have to solve. We need to get to an answer that hopefully advances, the business's goals.
Yeah, it can be hard, right? And some of those issues can be quite difficult, but you need those practical lawyers. And sometimes it's hard. Like Jeff said, they lose you lose the forest through the trees, either very young lawyers or maybe even very old.
I guess I would imagine you as an in-house or as a client are, just looking for an answer that's not carved up with lawyerly caveats,
Yeah, I mean, look, I am a lawyer also, so I can live in that world.
Right. You get it.
Right. I know there are times, it's not frequent, but when I'll ask one of my firms, I'll put them on the spot. Like, I want either opinion on this or a memo on that. Mm-hmm. And then, look, I'm realistic enough to know how. It's going to be qualified. Right. Yeah. No one's going to give you a flat answer on anything, right? Not with their...
But at the end, there's going to be an answer, one way or the other.
Masthead, right?
Right, yeah.
But I don't think, I know you're sort of a little bit tongue-in-cheek saying you're a difficult client, but I think everything you're asking for is what should be the standard, right?
Because you're a good lawyer, Brad.
No, honestly, I know there are several people around here who might use worse terms than difficult to describe me, but when you're putting out a product, why would you not put your best foot forward, right? And
I was trained that way. Like when I was at that big white shoe firm in New York, things went out. They were, again, like I said before, they were tight, they were solid, there were no errors, everything was run down, there were no open questions. So I kind of expect that when I'm paying those kind of fees.
Sure. Right. So setting aside your expectations, do you think that there has been a general decline on, the quality of work out there? Do people tend to be sloppier? And here's why I ask that is because I think we are a little looser now because our primary mode of communication is either email or even worse, text. And there's typos and it's not like traditional language anymore, so we're a little bit more flexible.
Yeah, look, the stick isn't inserted that far, right? Different media have different levels of formality. Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the specific word choice. It's, are there typos?
Right.
And are you not giving me the advice that I'm looking for? Like the practical advice, right? You could type a text and use shorthand for TXT.
Right.
That's okay. I'm speaking for you, but for me, that would be okay.
Right.
But if you're putting it into a document, yeah, you can't use that. But I'm not looking for big words. Like I don't need all the big fancy words. Just give me the right words in the right spot.
Clarity. Right.
And make sure that it's clean, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, there are, like you said, there's emails and texts, and it's a different standard, right? I mean, it's depending how you're communicating, but the principle holds, right? Like however you're communicating, even if it's somewhat informally, at least have your ducks in a row, get it right, be clear. I mean, these are basic things you learned in lawyering, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we hammer to our attorneys here is that, don't send the client an email that says, here's the issue, what do you think? Like we never should ask our client what the client thinks. We should say, here's the issue, this is what we recommend, do you agree? Not
and just, here's why we recommend it,
here's why we recommend
here's the support for it or whatever, right?
Yeah, because you're looking to us to make your life easier. To me, like the client is hiring a lawyer to make their life easier so that we do the analysis and we make a recommendation. And the client can either agree with it or not agree with it. And I think a lot of lawyers lose sight of that.
And I think I don't know if all of your clients necessarily have sophisticated in-house departments, right? So maybe you're dealing more with business people, operators without that legal background. So I would go back to what Brett said before, which, I like that kind of list of risks and opportunities with any kind of answer. Like, well, you could take this path, but here's what might happen, and here's roughly what I think the probabilities are,
right?
So that we can make an
informed decision. Yeah.
Right? Because, at a bigger corporation, they've got people like me and my team that can evaluate that kind of advice, right?
What kind of billing practices cause you to change horses in the middle of a case? What are we talking about just generally?
Opaque billing.
Right.
Again, seeing mistakes in the invoices, that's very frustrating. You see firms getting their matters mixed up, or see, you're like, who's this guy? Like, there's a name for a phone call. You're like, that person doesn't work here.
Right.
Don't do that.
Right. Don't bill me for somebody else's time.
If you're sending me a bill for thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars or perhaps more, like just come on. Like read
get that part right.
Yeah. Get that part right.
Yeah. We also have a rule internally that is the client should never learn about something we did from the bill.
Right.
Good rule.
Yeah.
That's a very good
should
rule.
Not be, they did a memo? I never saw a memo. They're billing me for it. All right. Good stuff. Barry, any parting thoughts? Besides, everyone should be sending their resumes to you.
Not
everyone.
Not everyone, only the qualified folks.
Okay.
So I think we're going to have Barry back to talk about Jeff's law school years, the lost years in law school.
Sorry, we're out of time today.
Gotta go.
We'll have you back. We'll have you back.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah, we really enjoyed having you. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star review. Follow us, share us with your friends and family. And if you want to hear about any topic on a future podcast or you're interested in being a guest, please reach out to us.
Thanks, Nelson.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks, man.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit fastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @FastAmron.